Hello everyone and welcome to the Kiali sprint demo and community meeting. This is for Kiali version 2.15 that's going out this Monday. So what we have on the agenda, we're going to talk about what's in this release. We're going to go over the things that we worked on, things that you can expect in the next release. We're going to talk about what's in progress, what's going to be in the next release or upcoming releases, and then we're going to have a community discussion at the end. So here's a summary of the things we worked on. In case you're interested, you can go and look and see. You can go to the Kiali project board, which is just going to the GitHub page with /Kiali, and you can see a summary of all the things that are in progress and all the things we're working on. So first up is the Kiali CRD schema changes. Maz, are you on the call? You want to talk about this? If not,
I am, but I'm trying to get my mute off. You can talk about it. You know just as much about it as I do.
Go for it.
So we're now shipping a actual OpenAPI schema in our Kiali CRD, which means you're going to have complete field validation and all checking of all properties in the Kiali CR. It's always been documented in Kiali IO, but it was never actually enforced at runtime. Now it's enforced at runtime because now the CRD is actually going to have the schema in it. So what this means is you don't have to run our validation tool offline like you did before to check your Kiali CR. You'll actually know if it's valid or not once you try to create it. So if you try to create the Kiali CR, if it's good, it'll just get created like it normally did. If it's bad, you'll get feedback immediately from the Kubernetes API, and it'll tell you what's wrong. So you'll get error messages that tell you what you got to fix. So that's really what that's all about.
It's a nice user experience improvement. Okay, next up is Perses Support for dashboards. Justina, you want to talk about this?
Sure, thank you, Nick. So in this version, we have included support in Kiali to visualize dashboards with Perses. So Perses is a CNCF sandbox project that is for showing dashboards. And well, at the same way as you can use Grafana, you can also use Perses that also have integration for data sources like Prometheus. So I'm going to show you a demo to see how this is integrated.
Let me know if you need me to stop sharing or if you can just take it over.
I think I can. Yeah, can you see now?
Yes.
Okay. Great. So yes, in the same way as Grafana, Kiali is going to show links to Perses when this is configured in the Kiali CR, but because by default it's going to be disabled. But it's another possibility. And as well as we have these Grafana links, we are also going to be able to see the Perses links. And these are the links that we have configured in our dashboards. So we can create different dashboards, like, for example, the workload dashboards using different variables to be used in the URL path that can be used to pre-select a dashboard in Perses. And let's go, for example, to see this product page once. Here we have some configured dashboard that will show us like more information that we actually are seeing in our Kiali dashboard, because this is just the inbound metrics, but it's going to pick up different different data, like, for example, this incoming request or the outbound services. And we can also see, for example, the Istio mesh dashboards or the Istio cTunnel ones. So this is, for example, the Istio mesh dashboard that are the same that the ones that we have here in Grafana. So in this example, I have set up both tools, but one can be disabled if we want. Well, in this case, the dashboard is not set up. Yeah, we have selected the dashboard and it's going to show here more or less the same information. There is a community dashboard project in the Perses project in case you want to try this Istio dashboard for Perses, if you are already using it. And there you can download these dashboards and you can also install it using or the Perses CLI or also the Perses operator. And let's see how this is seen in the mesh page. So we have our external services here. And as well as we have Grafana or Prometheus, we have also Perses. Is checking the status that in this case is, you can see that this is healthy service and we see the version. And the main important things that we need to set up for Perses is first we need to enable, then we need to set up the internal URL. The internal URL is used because Kiali is going to validate the dashboards, and if it cannot validate, it's going to hide these links to Perses. And the external URL is going to be used to create these external links. Also, we have a project because Perses creates the dashboards based on a project that is going to be mapped as a namespace. And in this case, we can see how we have different dashboards configured. Related to the authentication, Perses in this version is going to support just anonymous and also basic in case we have set up Perses using the native authentication method. And I think that's all. I'm going to stop presenting.
Thanks, Josine. All right, let me see if I can find my way back to the slides. So the next feature that's going into this release is the ability to run Kiali locally. The short summary of this is that without having to install Kiali into your cluster, you can now just download the Kiali binary itself and run it locally from your laptop. It's driven off your kubeconfig file. It works with multi-cluster. And the goal is for you to be able to easily get up and running with Kiali in a way that enables you to do that without actually having to go through deploying it and securing it and whatnot. So I'm going to do a short demo of that if I can find the right tabs. All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Should see the terminal.
Yep.
All right, so I have the Kiali binary here. And you can see there's now this run command that you can run, and it's got a whole bunch of command line flags in there. But I have a cluster running, and I can do this to show you that there are no Kiali pods that are actually deployed in this cluster. And so let me clear this. If I just do Kiali run, it's going to run the Kiali server locally and launch Kiali. And then you'll see that there's some errors that pop up here. And that's because it can't talk to the Prometheus that's deployed inside of the cluster if it's running outside of the cluster. Normally when you set up Kiali, it's deployed into the cluster. By default, it will connect to a Prometheus that's running inside of the cluster. Because we're running outside of the cluster, we have to have another solution for this. So the way that you can get around that is if you provide this port forward flag. So if you provide port forward prom, Kiali will port forward to the Prometheus pod running inside of the cluster and you're allowing the Kiali binary to connect to Prometheus that's running inside of the cluster. So now we get no more errors about Prometheus. If we go to the graph, we can look at the graph and see all of our traffic here, but we still see these lock icons. And the reason for that is because cluster names matter to Kiali. The way that the metrics work is that there's a specific cluster name that's attached to all the different metrics, and that's driven by the cluster name that you set within Istio. The way that Kiali and whenever you're running it locally decides what the cluster name is. It just pulls the cluster name that is inside of your kubeconfig, and the two of them may not always match. So in this case, my cluster name is kind east in my kubeconfig, whereas the cluster name, according to Istio, is east. So a way that you can get around this is by providing Kiali with an override flag. So there's an override flag called cluster name overrides that just let you specify an alias for a particular cluster, right? So we're going to specify the original name of the cluster, which is kind east, and then we'll do you can specify multiple clusters here, so we'll specify kind west. And the walk icons went away, except for the west cluster. So if you'll notice, if we go back to the overview page, we're only seeing the east cluster right now. And that's because by default, Kiali will just use your current context. So if you want to provide it additional context, additional clusters, that's just an additional command line flag that you add here. So every remote context or remote cluster context you want to add, you can provide that as a command line flag. Remote cluster context, I'll say kind west. And now we see everything from the west cluster. And we're in multi-cluster mode, so we get the cluster label on our namespace cards. We go back to the graph, we can see the walk icon went away. And that you can use Kiali this way without it being deployed in the cluster, just from the command line. And everything works as you would expect it to. I don't have tracing enabled right now, but if I did, you could use traces the same way. This little icon up here is telling me that Grafana is expected to be enabled by default, but it's not. But there's also, so you can do the same thing with tracing and Grafana as we did with Prometheus. You can provide it with port forward flags where it will enable port forwarding to the service running inside of the cluster. If your service is not running inside of the cluster, if it's exposed externally in some way, you can just provide a config file for Kiali. So if my Prometheus was exposed externally, I would set up my Kiali config file to talk to my external Prometheus the same way that you would set up a Kiali config file if it was deployed inside of the cluster. It's the same config file, you just give it external services and the URL to Prometheus, and you can connect to it that way. So authentication with the Kubernetes API server is all done from your kubeconfig user, and it just goes off the context that you provided here, which is also configurable. So this is the local mode, feature that we're adding in this version. Hopefully we'll publish binaries for different platforms on the Kiali releases pages on GitHub, so be looking for that, where you can download the binary for your platform. That's it for that demo. Let me get back to the slides. All right, some other notable changes that went in this sprint. We had some CI changes that simplified some things with a Cypress test. We added a demo for OpenShift installing support. We added tests for Helm charts, so we can verify the Helm charts are correct for the server and the operator whenever we're making changes for those. We added CI support for ambient testing demos for OpenShift, and there was we made a performance enhancement that disables caching for config maps that could cause increased memory usage, especially on larger clusters with a lot of config maps that are present. Some bug fixes that went in. There's an that happened, a possible that happened in certain ambient environments. We fixed that issue. There's also missing permissions for the inference gateway resources. Inference gateway being the Gateway API extension Kiali added support for that recently, so, and the operator didn't have permissions, but that was added as a bug fix later. There's a validation styling for workloads that was fixed, and we fixed a bug on the mesh page whenever you're running Kiali with multiple control planes in a multi-tenant environment. So what do we have coming up for the next sprint? Again, you can go to the Kiali project board and you can see what our backlog is, what the different things we have in progress are to get a sense of what we're working on. Here are just some of the highlights that you can see here. And that's it for the sprint demo. I'm going to stop the recording and open up the floor to questions in case anyone has them. Thanks, everyone.